The shadow loomed before Leora, its presence cold and alive, whispering threats in voices older than memory. She could not see it, but she could feel it pressing on her mind, tugging at her fear, trying to drown her in doubt. "Do not falter," the king whispered beside her, his hand weakly grasping hers. "You are stronger than it thinks." Leora inhaled sharply, summoning every ounce of focus she possessed. The shadow moved like liquid darkness, its claws stretching toward them. Her gift, her ability to sense souls and threads of energy, flared within her, illuminating the essence of the creature. It was a being born from anger, betrayal, and centuries of resentment, tied to the curse that had imprisoned the king for so long. "I can feel it," Leora said, voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. "It wants your suffering, but it cannot take you while I am here." The king's hand tightened around hers, a mixture of relief and awe in his tone. "Your courage, it is extraordinary." They had come far since leaving Eldon's Hollow. Leora had grown into her gift more fully than she had ever imagined, and the king had learned the fragility of relying on another, especially someone so young and untested. They were bound together now, not only by fate but by mutual trust. The shadow surged forward, and Leora reached into the depths of her soul, reaching past fear, past the walls of doubt she had built all her life. She touched the essence of the creature, seeing its pain, its fear of light, its desire to dominate and destroy. And then she did something the shadow did not expect. She spoke to it. "You do not belong here," she said softly. "Leave this place. The king is not yours to claim." The creature recoiled, shrieking as if her words carried the weight of truth itself. Leora felt the threads of the curse begin to tremble, unraveling slightly with each pulse of her inner sight. The king's form brightened as the darkness loosened around him, but the battle was far from over. The creature struck again, more vicious this time, and the king faltered. Leora's hands instinctively found his shoulders. "Hold on," she whispered. "I am here. You are not alone." For the first time, the king allowed himself to lean entirely on her guidance. The darkness reacted to their bond, and Leora's presence began to cleanse it, piercing through the veil of centuries-old torment. The air around them shimmered, alive with power neither fully human nor fully divine. Leora could feel the curse like a living storm, twisting and clawing at both her and the king, threatening to undo everything. Yet she stood firm, reaching deeper, touching the king's soul in ways no one ever had. "You are not afraid?" the king asked, voice trembling, not from fear but from astonishment. "I am," she admitted quietly. "But I cannot let you die. Not like this. Not ever." The words seemed to strengthen him. Slowly, he lifted his head, meeting the darkness with a defiance born of centuries of survival. And through Leora's connection, he began to feel something he had long thought impossible. Hope. Together, they stepped into the heart of the shadow realm, the source of the curse itself. The world around them twisted and turned, walls of black mist forming and dissolving with each heartbeat. Shadows whispered in unintelligible tongues, trying to distract, to frighten, to break them. Leora's hands brushed the king's arm instinctively, and they moved as one, their steps guided by trust and understanding. At the center of the realm, they found the essence of the curse, a swirling mass of shadows with red-hot eyes that pierced the darkness. It hissed, ancient and malevolent, a being of bitterness that had thrived on the king's suffering for centuries. "You cannot touch him," it growled. "No mortal, no child, no blind fool can undo what time has woven." Leora lifted her chin, though no eyes could see her resolve. "You are wrong. Time cannot save what is already lost, but it cannot break what is pure." She reached into herself, into the very core of her gift, and touched the king's soul, weaving warmth, courage, and the essence of hope into the threads of the curse. The shadow shrieked, thrashing violently. The king fell to his knees, but Leora did not release him. She allowed herself to feel his pain, his fear, his loneliness, and in that understanding, the curse began to fracture. The shadow tried to resist, but it was powerless against the bond between them. Suddenly, the darkness shattered like glass, exploding into shards of black mist that scattered into the void. The king fell forward, but Leora caught him, holding him close. The curse was broken. The weight that had bound him for centuries lifted, leaving him mortal once more, but whole, alive, and free. He looked at her, and for the first time truly saw her, not with eyes, but with a depth of understanding. "You saved me," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. You saved yourself, she replied, smiling gently. I only helped you see it. For a moment the world was quiet. Even the shadow realm seemed to pause, acknowledging the end of its reign. Leora held the king's hand, feeling the pulse of life and warmth where only death had lingered before. Days passed as they made their way back from the shadow realm. The land outside seemed brighter, sharper, as if the curse had dulled the edges of the world itself. Leora guided the king carefully, sensing his newfound strength and the fragility that came with it. The Alpha King, once untouchable and immortal, now relied on someone his own age, someone he had underestimated, and in that reliance a bond grew, gentle, slow, yet unshakable. One evening, as they rested beside a quiet river, the king spoke, his voice softer than she had ever heard. I have ruled for centuries. I have fought battles that no one could imagine. I have loved and lost, but I have never trusted anyone fully. Never. Until you. Leora felt her cheeks warm, though no one could see. I did not come to be trusted, she said quietly. I came because it was my path, but I am glad. They sat together in silence, the sound of the river filling the space between them. Leora sensed the king's unspoken thoughts, the remnants of loneliness still lingering in his heart. She placed a hand on his arm. You are not alone anymore. You will not be. Not ever. He nodded, his eyes, though she could not see them, reflecting centuries of emotion. I have been given a second chance. Because of you. But even as they shared this quiet triumph, a shadow stirred beyond the trees. Far above the valley, a dark figure watched, its intentions unclear but its presence unmistakable. The king's enemies had not vanished. The threat of war, of power and betrayal, still lingered like a storm on the horizon. Leora sensed it before she could hear it, feeling the subtle threads of malice weaving through the air. She tightened her grip on the king's hand, ready for whatever came next. Whatever comes, she said softly, we face it together. The king looked at her, a mixture of admiration, longing, and something deeper he could not name. He had faced centuries of enemies, of betrayal, and yet in this young, blind woman, he had found something he had thought impossible: trust, hope, and perhaps even love. And in that moment, standing on the edge of victory and uncertainty, they understood that their journey was only beginning. The curse was broken, the king restored, but the world still held shadows, secrets, and dangers beyond imagining. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a message only Leora could sense, a warning, a promise, and a challenge. And in the quiet of the valley, the Alpha King and the blind seer prepared to face whatever darkness awaited. Together. End of Part 2. Cliffhanger. High above, beyond the mountains and forests, a figure cloaked in shadow smiled, unseen by the world below. They believe the battle is over, it whispered. But they have only begun. The sky darkened slightly as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the next chapter of fate to unfold. Leora had never seen the sunrise. She had never known the exact color of the sky or the shape of a tree. Her world was painted in sound, scent, and touch. At 20 years old, blind since birth, she had grown used to the quiet rhythm of her life in Eldon's Hollow. The village, hidden deep in a valley where the mountains blocked the horizon, was small and unremarkable. But it was home, and Leora's heart beat in time with its simple, gentle life. She could feel the wind before it touched her skin. She knew the steps of each villager by the weight they carried, the sound of their boots against the stone path, and she could sense the souls of those around her, not with sight but with a gift that few understood. Leora could perceive the whispers of essence, the hidden feelings buried beneath the surface. She often said softly to herself, I may not see the world, but I can feel its truth. It was a quiet evening, the air thick with the smell of rain that had passed hours ago. Leora was tending her small garden of herbs when a knock shattered the calm. She paused, instinctively reaching for the walking stick she always carried. Leora, a voice rasped from beyond her door. Weak. Dying. She opened the door and felt a man stumble into her arms. His clothing was torn, his face pale. He smelled of blood and dust. Who are you? She asked, gripping him carefully. The Alpha King, he whispered, his voice breaking. The curse. Only you. His words faltered and his hand fell limp. Leora dropped to her knees beside him, panic rising. She tried to hear his heartbeat, but it slowed and then stopped. He was gone, leaving only the echo of his warning in her ears. That night, a shadow moved through Eldon's Hollow. A massive black steed carried a figure draped in silvered darkness, his presence commanding and dangerous. He stopped before Leora's small cottage. The ground beneath him seemed to hum, and even the wind seemed to bend around him. "You are Leora," he said, his voice smooth and strong, yet lined with centuries of exhaustion. I am," she replied cautiously, gripping her stick. "Who are you?" "I am the Alpha King," he said, "and I am dying. You are the only one who can save me." The words hit her like a stone. She could sense the weight of his truth even without seeing him. Something in the air told her he was no ordinary man. There was pain, centuries of it, and beneath that, an unyielding power that refused to break. "Why, me?" she asked. "Because you can see what others cannot," he replied. "You see souls, not faces. You feel truth where others feel lies. You can untangle the curse that binds me." Leora's heart hammered. She had never left her village. She had never faced danger beyond the woods surrounding Eldon's Hollow. And now she was being asked to save a man who carried centuries of life and death within him. Fear whispered in her mind. She wanted to say no, but part of her, a quiet, hidden part, knew she could not. The king dismounted, and though she could not see him, she felt the intensity of his presence. He radiated strength, but also a strange fragility, as if every step cost him more than it should. He was not merely a man, he was a force of nature, and yet he was vulnerable in ways no one else could see. They began their journey at dawn. The village lay behind them, small and silent, while the path ahead wound through dark forests where sunlight barely touched the ground. Leora's hand brushed against the air, feeling the presence of trees, rocks, and hidden dangers. She guided the king in return, sensing the rhythm of his weakened steps. Along the way, she began to see more than her gift had ever allowed. Through touch and instinct, she glimpsed fragments of the king's long life. Battles waged and lost, betrayals that had scarred his soul, centuries of solitude. She felt his loneliness as if it were her own, and for the first time she understood the burden of immortality. "Do you always carry such pain?" she asked quietly, sensing his hesitation. He did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "Pain is all that remains when time stretches beyond memory. The stronger I became, the more I lost, until now." Her hand brushed against his. It was instinctive, searching, and she felt the faint tremor in his bones. In that moment, she did not need to see him to understand his weight, his humanity, his need. And though fear tried to creep into her heart, she felt a strange comfort in being needed, in being the one who could touch what no one else could. The night fell thick and heavy as they reached the edge of the Forest of Whispers. Shadows moved in unnatural ways, and Leora's senses screamed warnings. Something was following them, something ancient and dark, drawn by the king's cursed energy. Suddenly, a shape lunged from the darkness. Leora gasped, instinct guiding her. She shouted, warning the king, and he moved just in time. The creature, pale and sharp-toothed, hissed and vanished into the trees as quickly as it had appeared. You saved me," the king said, his voice thick with disbelief. "I could feel it," she replied simply. "I knew it was coming." That night they camped beneath twisted branches. Leora touched the king's hand as he slept, feeling the faint pulse of the curse coursing through him. She shivered. It was not just a sickness of the body. It was something older, darker, tied to his very soul. In her dreams, the curse spoke to her. She saw flashes of fire and shadow, of battles she could not name, of screams that had lasted centuries. She felt the king's fear, his anger, and the quiet hope that had survived despite everything. When dawn came, Leora awoke with a clarity she had never known. She could feel the threads of the curse, faint and fragile, but there, and she understood that her gift alone would not be enough. She would have to reach deeper, risk herself, and trust in something she had never trusted before. They continued their journey, crossing mountains and rivers, always followed by the silent threat of unseen enemies. Leora's confidence grew, though fear never left her. And the king, despite his pride and power, began to lean on her, trusting her guidance in ways he had never trusted anyone before. One evening, they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking the Valley of Shadows. The wind tore through her hair and whipped at their cloaks. Leora felt the king tense beside her. "The curse. It grows stronger here," he said. She reached for his hand instinctively, Then we face it together, she said. As their fingers touched, a wave of energy burst from the king. Leora cried out, not in pain, but in shock. The curse reacted to her presence, its dark tendrils twisting and clawing at the edges of her consciousness. She felt his life, his memories, his despair all rushing into her, and it was almost too much to bear. The king fell to one knee, gasping, his strength failing him. Leora's heart raced, but she refused to step back. She reached out with her mind, her soul, her gift, and touched the core of the darkness. She felt it shrink slightly, recoiling at her touch. But then a new presence appeared behind her, a shadow that moved with purpose, dark and alive. Leora sensed it immediately. It was no ordinary creature. It was an enemy of the king, one who had lingered for centuries, waiting for the moment of weakness. Leora, the king whispered, his voice strained. Do not falter. You are the only one who can save me. The wind tore at them. The shadow advanced, and the cliff seemed to stretch infinitely into darkness. Leora's hand trembled as she reached for the king. And then everything erupted in a blinding surge of light and darkness, leaving them suspended on the edge.